This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring Justin Hoffman, Assistant Director of Graduate Recruitment and Assistant Coach at Concordia University, Nebraska. Coach Hoffman highlights his passion for coaching, his career path, and maintaining boundaries for a good work-life balance. If you like this podcast, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new episodes each week. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Hoffman.
Coach, what's going on, man? Good to see you.
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Well, I had the great opportunity to kind of bump into you at TAPSCon here in Waco. The private school sector put on a convention for all the private schools in the state of Texas, and the AFCA, it's in our backyard, so we made our appearance for sure to try to get some membership. And I ran into the Assistant Director of Graduate Recruitment at Concordia, Nebraska, and we ended up having a heck of a conversation. And so great you can hop on with us so fast, man. Let's kind of dive into this thing. We're going to talk about this Assistant Director of Graduate Recruitment and football and all that kind of stuff, how it ties up. But before we do that, I want to talk about when and how did you decide that you want to be a ball coach?
Golly, man. So that's a good question, and obviously thank you for having me on. And so football's been important to me my whole life. And honestly, the football side of things is what directed me to wanting to be a coach and wanting to do that. And ultimately, I went into the corporate world out of school, and I was actually in corporate America. I wasn't coaching. I wasn't doing anything. I was working for a couple different, kind of higher end credit card processing companies, and really felt that itch to kind of get back to football. I was a first generation college student, and so I knew the impact of that football had for me at the high school level as well as at the college level. And so for me, really, we made a move to Colorado, and in some ways, I was just looking for my people. I was looking for people to connect with, and got connected with Coach Lemon at now he's the AD at Eaton High School, but kind of got connected with him and started. That's where my coaching journey really started. And so from there, I coached offensive line and defensive line at Eaton High School in Colorado, and really started to get involved into things. I coached freshman football. I was a defensive coordinator for the C team, like just all the different levels and being able to help. And it was a really cool, cool experience. But ultimately it came to a point where my wife looked at me and said, I think you need to go find a college job. And I was like, I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how that's going to be. So I was, a 28-year-old man putting in GA jobs and just trying to find. We had a good enough cushion that could support us for at least a year. Yeah. And to move into that and so we could go find a job. So I'm applying for GA jobs and I'm getting declined all over the place, right? Nobody wants an old man to come GA for them. But luckily, Coach Snyder at Peru State took a chance on me. And so I was able to come back home. I'm originally from Fairbury, Nebraska. And I was able to come back to the Nebraska area and coach at Peru State. And so at Peru, I coached, started at D-line. Then I coached linebackers. I actually started at wide receiver. I was a wide receiver in a triple option offense. So all offensive line guy, that was really easy. I was just working with a lot skinnier dudes. And so worked wide receivers, coached linebackers, and then I coached defensive line for 2 years there. And then made my way over to Concordia and kind of started out at defensive line here and then worked over to fullbacks and tight ends. And now I'm coaching the running backs. So I know that's a elongated answer, man, but
yeah, man,
there's a lot of history there. So
absolutely, man. Well, let's dissect it a little bit, okay? So you decided you want to be a ball coach, okay? What does that conversation, number one, look like with your wife? Saying
Golly.
that, hey, I'm doing well. This reputable company. I put on a coat and tie every single day. I look good, and now I want to go wear basketball shorts and gym shorts and a t-shirt and a whistle around my neck. Number one, how does that conversation look like? And then, you mentioned getting connected with the coach at Eaton there. How, what was that process like to get started? Did you have to get any certifications? Just what was some of that stuff that initially happen for that transition to work?
Yeah, so I was coaching at Eaton and doing corporate sales.
Okay.
So I was doing both, right? So that part of it wasn't necessarily there, but what it was an added time that we hadn't normally been putting in. And I think that's where my wife saw the passion that I had. And honestly, man, I've neglected to say it to this point, but obviously I'm at Concordia. Faith is a huge part, and my wife is a very spiritual woman. She loves Jesus with all of her heart and is very proud of that. And so she had a lot of peace in that because she knew what I was doing in the mission that I was working. Right. So that transition part wasn't as difficult because we didn't have kids at that time. We had a dog, like it was just us. The transition that was difficult was from going high school to going, and I'll be transparent, but to going to making under $10,000 a year, right? Essentially stipend guy out of the gate. Yeah. So to go from corporate America, where I'm top 5 in the company, to making that as a coach, that was a harder transition. Yeah. Now my wife supported me through the whole thing. And she's the one that came to me and said, "Hey, I think you need to go find it." And she knew really black and white kind of what it was going to be, that it was going to be a very different shift to change. And so, from that side, she was super supportive, but it was difficult, man. It was difficult just because our lifestyle had to change. Right. But the cool thing, and this is how I knew I was on the right track, I never woke up one day and thought, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I never did.
Absolutely. And, you said something important there. Obviously that financial transition is tough. And, you talked to many guys who ever did anything in between, the beginning of their coaching career, and when they graduate, when they make that transition, they have to take such a significant pay cut. That is always a big part of that story, versus somebody that immediately graduates and gets to be a GA and they never experience, $50K, $80K, $100K or anything like that, and then all of a sudden to take that significant pay cut. So clearly, you said your wife was prepared for that, but the one thing that's hard to prepare for is really the time commitment, how much it changes. Even from high school to college. I mean, high school coaches put in crazy hours, but when the season is over, sometimes they get to transition to other sports or they're off or whatever. But it goes to recruiting, then it goes to spring ball, then it goes to camp time in the summer, and it kind of never stops. What was that transition like? Not only for you but for your wife as well.
Yeah, so I'll say this: she was very supportive the whole time. The beginning of that transition wasn't bad. It really wasn't incredibly difficult because I was already putting in a ton of time. I was working a full-time job and I was coaching high school football, and I was more involved than I probably needed to be in a lot of aspects of that high school football experience, right? Yeah. So that transition wasn't as difficult. It became difficult year 2 of coaching at the college level when I had our son, Judah. Okay. That became difficult, right? Because now, we had Judah August 4th. Report date was August 6th that year. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So from the get-go, I'm not super involved. I'm learning how to do this, right? Some coaches talk about how they have this great balance and they understand. I was not that guy from the start. Yeah. I've learned it now, but I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand the value of that. That transition was a lot harder for her. But again, it came back to me having to put down the coaching and start to put up a little bit of a barrier, right? And some boundaries. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but put up some boundaries of nope, when I get home, I have to pay attention. That became more important when we had our son. My wife is a coach. She coached softball as well. And so she understands, she doesn't currently or hasn't done it, when we came to Nebraska, but she understood the commitment. Yeah. And again, she knew the mission field that I was working in, and the purpose at which I was doing it. And I think that gave her a lot of peace. But again, when a child comes involved, it was just a lot different. And I had to learn how to strategize and really work through that and create those boundaries. Because you're right, man, at Peru, I was doing all the strength and conditioning. At the small college level, that's kind of just the hats that you wear. So I was doing strength and conditioning. I was doing all the social media, and I was doing obviously all the position stuff, and I was a special teams coordinator. So it wasn't for a lack of things to do, but I had to start making sure I prioritized things, and I didn't do that very well in the beginning. I'll be the first to say that.
Absolutely, man. I mean, parenting by itself is just a learning experience, but then you add on being early in your career at the collegiate level. It's easier to ask you what do you not do than ask you what do you do for the school. That can only be difficult. Now, one of the things that was interesting as you kind of ran over your bio a little bit in terms of all the positions that you coach is. Once again, I asked the question: what did you not coach? Right? I mean, you coached almost every position on the field, and everybody's collegiate experience is a little different, but at most a guy's going to play maybe 3 different positions, over the course of a 4 or 5 year career at the collegiate level. But most people go to college and just play one position. How do you prepare yourself for these positions that you have absolutely zero familiarity with? How do you go and make sure that you can give your all for that position when you just don't have that experience? What's your go-to?
Well, twofold on that. One, I think the way I go about it is teaching football. And I've done that with every position is I've just taught football. I've taught it from that perspective, which is key. But just teaching guys to understand football. I think that's the thing we've talked about a little bit, and I talk with guys all the time about it. Like, and it just feels like football players that come to us don't always understand football. They are phenomenal position players. Mm-hmm. They are phenomenal athletes. They don't understand the game of football. And so it becomes harder for those guys to move positions. And so teaching them football helps me understand. I come from an offensive line perspective, obviously. So we were talking, a little bit about the running back, right? And it's just so different, right? Offensive line is very technique based. I have an assignment. I know what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm looking for. Where a running back, in a lot of ways, is going to be a guy that is gifted, has athletic ability, and you're gonna put some guardrails, and then you're just gonna let them be an athlete to a degree, and coach the details of things. So that's kind of where that transition becomes a little bit different within the positions. But I think one is recognizing that, and two is coaching the details of it to the ability. Now the other side is I pride myself in going and seeking knowledge. So every single time, right? Every time I've hopped onto the AFCA available content. I've hopped on to other coaches that are within the area or that I know I have connections with. Right? I'm blessed to be at Nebraska, and there's some really good guys that have been able to plug into me there, and just give me some good fundamental things from a running back position standpoint. Some of those guardrails that I need to learn. And help me with those things. The same thing with tight ends. I mean, I went and seeked knowledge and seeked it out. But ultimately, man, I had to choose to do that because I didn't know it, and I'm not the guy that's going to act like I do.
Right.
I'm going to go learn it, and I'm going to earn respect as a coach by learning their position, just like you would in corporate America, right? I make that transition and that connection with people all the time. Corporate America, if I'm going to go take over a sales team, I'm going to have to learn about that team. I'm going to have to learn what makes that team tick. I'm going to have to learn and figure out, hey, what about this team is good? I may know the fundamentals of sales and I may know the product at which we're selling, but I have to understand the team in order to motivate them and help them be the best team they can be to move forward. Right.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of correlations between those two worlds. And I've been blessed to be able to connect them. You know what I mean?
No doubt. Absolutely, man. And I love that you kind of mentioned, teaching football. Anybody's listening to the podcast, I mentioned coaching receivers for my career. And one of the funnest things for me was to always get that group of freshmen that come in and teach them about, coverages. Yeah, because none of them understood it. They could all get open. They were all super talented, as you mentioned. But, when you start asking those questions, hey man, what kind of What kind of leverage did that guy have? Coach, what's leverage mean? And all that kind of stuff. And you're like, man, you have so much of a ceiling now, because this is going to make you better when you can walk out there, take a quick peek at the coverage, and see how you're going to attack a guy. And so when you start talking about coaching football, what are some of the things that as you're with your running backs, or as you were going through that tight end transition, it's easy for O-line, probably even D-line to a certain extent for you. But some of those other positions, what are some of the things that, just give us a couple examples of some stuff that you taught these guys to help them be better at the game of football?
Yeah, it depends depending on the position, but even like understanding those things, right? Understanding coverages, understanding, are they one high or two high? You don't have to know exactly what coverage in. Does that help? Sure. Yeah. But understanding, like, what does one high mean? What does two high mean? Right? You know what I mean? If the corner's playing off of you and they're one high, right, probably getting some version of cover two or cover three. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, understanding some of those things, understanding with a running back position, like, you're most likely where you're going to hit is going to be determined on what front you're getting. So understanding, hey, they're in a three-man front, right? We've got a walked up backer on the backside. Like, okay, where's this gap going to end up? Where could it end up? Understanding just those fundamental, even just, again, the fundamental side of things of, like, okay, what is the offensive line doing? Right? As a running back, like, how are they blocking this? Because I think a lot of times a running back just looks and says, I need to be an A-gap, right? We're running trap, I need to be an A-gap. Right. We're running trap, I need to be an A-gap. Well, understand, how are they blocking it? Because when you understand how they block it, and then you understand what they see in front of them, you can understand, you know what? Now, we got two eyes, and we still have trap calls. Like, this is going to get real tight real quick. Right. Or that it's going to hit wider, right? Because maybe they're going to leave the DN. He's lined up in a 5, and we're going to leave him. We're going to hit wider now. Like, understanding some of those things from a football perspective and thinking through the process of football. I'm not trying to teach guys rules, and I mean, if they ask, at least understand situations. That's probably a big thing too. We've had some running backs run out of bounds, with 4 minutes left.
Yeah. That's tough.
Let's not do that. Let's not do that next time. So, little things like that. Just making sure and really hitting home that those are important aspects of the game. And then teaching through that, right? Like you said, the leverage side of things, understanding if a guy's lined up on my inside shoulder, I'm a tight end and he's lined up on my inside shoulder, and I've got to dig him out. Like, yeah, technique, right, tells me that I'm supposed to zone reach this guy. The reality is I'm going to have to take a deeper step, and I'm going to have to get on my horse and really cross leg and get to that outside shoulder, or at least keep a body between a body, right? We talk about that coaching wide receivers all the time. Hey, you keep a body between a body, they can't make the tackle. Right. So just do what you need to do to keep a body between a body. So anyway.
Yeah, man.
That good?
No, that's 100%. I mean, I think that's awesome stuff that, some coaches kind of do naturally, but I think a lot of coaches maybe get so caught up in, teaching a playbook. Hey, get it 10 yards, sink your heels, blah, 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 blah. But, when you get to the point that you can get beyond, of course you have to understand where play's supposed to hit, or what you're responsible for in coverage or whatnot, what gap you have as a backer or something like that. But, once you get past that, how can you help milk more out of the game for them, man? And I think when you start looking at the collegiate level and professional level, even at the high school level, to be honest with you, you see some guys that maybe don't have as much talent. They're not going to, go win a 100-meter dash or, win a high jump or anything like that. And they just are super productive receivers or, running backs or whatever. And you're like, he has an edge. And a lot of times that edge is just having a knack for the game and having a good understanding. Yep. When a guy's standing here, this is what he tends to do when his shoulders are here. And that, man, that can be so special. But
we had an All-American real quick, man. We got a guy that was an All-American, Lane, that here at Concordia, that, I mean, he'll be the first to tell you, I mean, he is not the best athlete that we've ever seen. But I think, if I understand it correctly, he leads has an all-time record, at least at the NAIA level, in all-time tackles. And he did that because he knew where to be and when to be there and how to be there, and he had a knack for doing that. Right? He was not a good athlete. Like, I shouldn't say he wasn't good. He was a good athlete.
Yeah, no, I
but
know
he
what you
was
mean.
not that phenomenal athlete that you think that you would have in that position. Like, he was just a guy that really knew where to be and how to be there and understood what he was looking at. And that's a huge component, right? That's a huge thing. So anyway, man, that just made me think of that. And, you know, I think, you know, anytime we can teach football, the biggest thing, and I know you've probably heard it, the biggest thing that makes my heart feel really warm is when a guy says, "Hey, I wish I would have known that in high school."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I wish I would have known that sooner. I wish that would have been explained to me sooner. Now it breaks my heart to know they didn't, but it makes me feel warm because, and like, I know that I made his football experience better, and I made him a better football player in that moment.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, that I call it the light bulb moment. That is my absolute favorite part when you're hammering something at home, and maybe the guy doesn't get it immediately, or maybe doesn't understand it immediately, or, you know, maybe like you said, the recollection part of the past, but that light bulb goes off, and they're like, "Dang." I went from a 82 ranked receiver on Madden to now all of a sudden I'm 87 because just because I understand this now. I just love seeing guys do that, and whether it's my coaching or just whatever that light bulb moment where it comes from, man. It's just such a special deal. Now let's transition real quick. You're currently at Concordia University in Nebraska, and you kind of got this unique situation as you took the job. Once again, early on, low level, it's lower level. It's gonna be difficult to generate significant income at the earlier you are in your career, regardless of where you're at. But at the lower levels, it can be a little bit more difficult. But the load is still humongous. The amount of work that you have to do. Talk to us a little bit about that first year. All the things that you were juggling, and you kind of lead that into how you transition into the next deal to your current role.
Yeah. So, So what you're alluding to. So, I like I said, I was at Peru State, and then I ended up transitioning over to Concordia. And at the time, there was no full time. So I was full time at Peru. I'd worked my way to be a full time assistant at Peru State, and then I transitioned over to Concordia, and there wasn't a full time position available. And so that first year, what I was doing, man, is I found a job at FedEx that would allow me to work in the morning. So at 4:00 in the morning, I'd go to FedEx every day, and I would be in the office by 9:30. And for the entire season, that's what I did. Because that's what, again, at that point, I've got a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old. Like, I had to do what I had to do to survive for my family, and still be in the position that I feel called to be, right? I feel as I'm called as a coach, and do that. And it was a grind, man. It was an absolute grind, but nothing but support all the way through it. Sunday afternoons were the time that I found to be able to relax. And by relaxing, I was able to actually watch the game film. And so that was my relaxing time, was watching the game film from Saturday. So, but it was good. It taught me, one, that this mattered, and it taught me that it was okay to really, really fight. I've been fighting my whole life. Again, like I alluded to, I was a first-generation college student, single-parent mom, like the whole thing, right? So I've been fighting. I was used to fighting, but I had never fought for my career.
Yeah. And
it taught me that, right? So fast forward a little bit, and position opens up in undergrad as an undergrad admissions counselor here at Concordia. And, through some conversations and through kind of just some knowledge of who I was, they were able to kind of bring me on and on the admissions side. And obviously I had to work with Coach Dabrico, our head coach, and he, he's been incredibly awesome, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that. But man, he has been phenomenal through this whole process and what that's all been. But he was completely open. He's like, hey, whatever you need to do, obviously appreciated what I did on the field, and the value that I added there. And so, he okayed that I would, from that end, that he would allow me to still coach. And so I started this journey of dual academic, and coaching. And I know, there's other places that this happens, and there's other places, but I also know that there's a lot of places that it doesn't happen anymore because people have been burned, or academics have been burned in most cases. because the coach, maybe didn't do what he said he was going to do. And so what you alluded to is starting to build those boundaries. I had built the boundaries right away. I knew this was my job in terms of the institution, was to recruit undergraduate students and work within my territory. And I also had the job of football. And I had to make sure I was very clear with both sides where each thing stood. And again, both sides were very respectful and very understanding because I had the integrity through the process. They knew they could trust me, and they knew that I was going to get the job done. They knew that I was going to do what needed to be done. And Coach Dabrical already knew my work ethic, right? He saw me that first fall. He knew what I was doing. He knew the grind that it took place for me to be a coach. And so, kind of worked through that. Had some success. Had success in the undergrad recruitment world, admissions world. Got promoted to assistant director of transfer enrollment. And then from there, I was kind of recruited out of undergrad and recruited into graduate. And that's where I'm at now, is the director of undergraduate recruitment. I'm responsible for our MBA program, our MHA and MPH programs, and then MSAA. And that's why we met, because I was recruiting athletic directors.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking. We were looking for athletic administrators and people that want to be that. So from my side, that now, the really cool thing is God's given me some talents and abilities and a passion for coaching, right? And I've been able to marry, if you will, that coaching passion with what the talents and abilities God's given me in the sales and relationship building world to grow an institution, which is incredibly gratifying and also a ton of work to keep those boundaries. But man, it's phenomenal just being able to marry those two things and do that. So does that kind of give you enough of the track of how to get there?
Absolutely. And I'm happy you kind of shared that and, talked about the boundaries, because, this is obviously a unique situation probably there at Concordia. It's probably a unique situation when it's all put together, but in the grand scheme of things, there's still a decent amount of people that are, coaching at a private school where they're a stipend only coach. They only show up for football practice, and they have to have another job, and they have to be able to go into that job and say, hey, look, at 4:00 I got to cut out of here, and I got to be at blank high school to conduct practice. And obviously it happens a lot at the at some of the divisional schools where salaries can be inflated just by having some opportunities to to work on campus or even work at FedEx or whatever that situation is. And I think I think one of the things that can get lost in transition is that you just want to, hey, I want to go do the best job I can at FedEx. I'm going to do the best job I can at coaching. I want both the parties to know that, never know that each other exists, and then it becomes hard. But I think coming out and being transparent and just been saying, hey, look, at this time, this is where I'm going to be, and this is going to be my job at the moment. I think that's some huge knowledge to kind of pass on. Now, but your head ball coach, when he goes and obviously kind of gives you some leverage to, maybe take a role like that. What does that mean? What does he mean to you and your family? As you're able to kind of have these two roles, still be a great father. I'm sure financially that's such a sigh of relief, and it's a good job, man. I mean, it's a fantastic gig that you have there.
Yeah, no, I'm blessed. I'm blessed in that way, and I always have to be honest. I miss full-time coaching. I do, but I also understand God has me where He wants me in this moment. And I need to do the best job I can do with what He's given me here, right?
Absolutely.
And Coach Dabrical is an incredible example of that, man. He's a mentor for me in a lot of different ways. He's a guy that he understands good coaches, and he really wants to build himself, his staff of just good coaches. He'll figure out the rest, right? We've got a coach that is in a very high position with a very big company, locally in Lincoln, and he figures it out, right? Hey, you're not going to be here on Monday, you're not going to be here on Friday. Hey, I understand. Like, we'll take you when we can get you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's also got some guys that are we've got the GAs that are learning through the process. And but what he wants to do is he wants to build a staff with guys that care about football, love football, and again, being completely honest, love Jesus, and want the best for the athletes. His big thing, man, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it. His big thing is keeping the locker room pure. And I couldn't agree more, right? When growing up, I grew up in Fairbury, Nebraska. There was not a lot of diversity in Fairbury, Nebraska, right? I get to my first college locker room at Doane College, and man, I'm right next to a guy from El Paso, and I'm right next to a guy from Chicago, right? And what better place, a melting pot to just grow as a person in a football locker room, right? But if a coach tries stepping in and tries to formulate all these things and strategize how we're going to do, there's room for some of that. But at the end of the day, man, you got to let the locker room be the locker room.
Yeah.
And he is a firm believer in that. He's a firm believer that, the locker room is a sacred place. And that relays over to everything else we do, right? So we don't have a lot of stuff that, we can control in that environment. Like as a coach, like he tells us where, what we can do, what we need to do, where we need to do it. And so, like I said, man, he's a fantastic mentor. He's a guy that has been tremendous through this transition and through this process, and has always been honest with me. Has always said, hey, I don't have a full-time position. Or I do, hey, full-time position's opening up. I think we're going to go in this direction, though. And has always been transparent with me. It was never a surprise. And so I respect him for that, and in the same, like he tries to find guys in their abilities, right? I handle all the travel for the football team as well. And so kind of manage and help and kind of work within that budget. And so, because it's something I'm good at and it's something I enjoy, and he knows that. And so he found a way for me to serve in that capacity as well. So, man, I like I said, I couldn't say enough good things. I appreciate what he's done and the opportunity he's given me. And even my director from the graduate side, former baseball coach, was an NAI baseball coach for over 15 years, and decided to go full time into the academic side. So he understands it too. He understands being a coach. And I think it warms his heart to know that there's somebody that's willing to work. I think that's the only thing, if somebody's saying, hey man, I think I want to go do that. Awesome. Make sure you have the integrity and make sure that you are actually willing to do the work, to make it happen, because you're not, I don't get to sit around and watch huddle all day.
Yeah.
That's not what I get to do. Like I'm recruiting graduate students. I'm going to Waco, Texas, to recruit graduate students. Like I'm not. So from that standpoint, like you have to understand, and then in some ways you have to cast the vision for the institution, right? That you can do that, because a lot of times you're going to get, you're going to get a response of, nah, we don't do that here.
Yeah.
We don't do that here. And you got to be able to cast the vision and show them that you can handle it and that you're trustworthy enough and you have enough integrity to do it. So,
yeah, man, it sounds like you work for two fantastic people there. Made a shout out to your head ball coach for for putting you in position and keeping good coaches around, not letting anything get in the way of that. Now, before I let you go, I always like talking a little bit about the AFCA Convention. And oftentimes some first experiences that you had there, just been indoctrinated to that huge networking opportunity, huge education opportunity. What was your first experience like, and what did you take away from it as you've kind of moved through your career thus far?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina was the first one that I went to. Not this year, but the couple of times previous to that, and the biggest thing I took away, I think the biggest thing I took away was, one is serious and one's a joke. The serious one is the amount of people, and the amount of coaches that are at your disposal. You have to take advantage of it. And I learned that. I was with, a really good friend of mine, Coach Lou Varley. He's still at Peru State. He was one AFCA Assistant Coach of the Year before. He's a phenomenal guy. And he really, he's setting up meetings with Navy. He's setting up meetings with, New Mexico State coaches at that time. Like he's setting up. And so I learned that, like, man, that's the process. Like you're going to go to this, you're going to get something out of it. It's not just for lack of better terms, a good old boys club. Like, you got to use this to your advantage. You got to use this to grow in the game of football. It's a good time, and there's plenty of good times to be had. But it's also an incredible opportunity, and if you don't take advantage of it. So Coach Varley really set me on a path for that, and meeting with guys and just setting up those meetings beforehand. I think that was the key. Is emailing a coach, sending a text to a coach if you got their number, like saying, hey, I'd love to get together at a convention. Are you available? Different things like that. And really having an idea, especially as a young coach, being able to do that. One, it grows your network of knowledge, right? For me, which is a big thing. But as a young coach, if you're willing and you want to go other places, it also grows your network of job opportunities, and you get to get in front of people, and they get to kind of see you in a different environment than in, maybe an interview process, right? So, which is a really cool setting. The joke part of it, I've learned that pretty much nobody remembers anybody's name, and everybody just says, "Hey, coach, how you doing, coach? Coach,
right.
Good to see you, coach." So that's the other thing I learned is that you better wear a name tag, because otherwise most people are just going to call you coach everywhere that you go.
That's exactly right. That's funny you said that. I was at the grocery store with my wife, and I have 2 daughters, and a little girl in the store yells out, "Daddy!" And I see myself looking a bunch of dads around the store, and I told my wife, was like, "Oh, this is like being at the convention and getting called coach," and everybody just turning around and see if they're talking to you. So yeah, man, that's hilarious, man. Hey, thanks so much for sharing this. This was cool. Once again, I ran into him at TapsCon, and man, next thing you know, we actually we did a podcast, but just in true dialogue. I was bouncing questions off of him. We were just kind of talking shop a little bit, and I just thought it was some content there that would be great for our listeners. So I know we have a ton of young coaches. Kind of have to work that work-life balance as they introduce kids. The financial piece is always huge. Having those jobs where you technically, coach only partial part of the day, and whether you're a teacher, whether you work in the business world and come over and coach, just a lot of good content there, man. So I appreciate you coming and sharing your story, Coach Hoffman. And if you wouldn't mind sharing your social media account, so if anybody has any questions or want to follow up with you, connect with you, they can do that.
Well, no, yeah, and I'd love to talk to anybody, man. I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and it was great getting to talk to you. I'd love to have more conversations on a podcast or not, man. I think there's just a lot of good stuff we can always talk about, and I just love talking to people. So anyway, on Twitter, it's at Coach_J Hoffman, and on Instagram, it's JHoffman_Coach. So it's pretty simple. I tried to get those switched, but Instagram wouldn't let me. So it is like that sometimes, but. Love to connect. We could put it. I'm sure we could put it in the bio too. Yeah. And have that stuff in there. And so, anything. If you see an area that I can help with, I'm here. I firmly believe God put me here to serve. And I'm more than happy to serve in any capacity I have the ability. So, I'd love to connect with anybody that has questions or just. Wants to talk about anything. So
absolutely. Well, I appreciate your willingness to do that, man. I thank you so much for hopping on. Have a good rest of the summer, a great fall, and look forward to seeing you in Nashville in 2024. All right.
All right. Love it, man. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Inside the Headset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA Convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit afcainsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter at Coach Mario Price. And remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.